Hi everyone. Today will be a really special day. It's our first time interviewing one of our BFAs here in our quarantine interview sessions. So today we will interview Mariah Vargas, and she's a very talented artist. I'm gonna read you guys her bio, and then I'll invite her in to be here with us. So Mariah Vargas is queer and feminist artist studying for her Bachelor's of Fine Arts degree at the University of Nevada, Reno. Mariah was an athlete throughout her childhood and early adult life. She feels that her athletic past facilitated an admiration for the physical relationship between artist and material. The physicality of three-dimensional making was simultaneously familiar, yet foreign, which fueled a drive to master and refine craftsmanship. As a sculptor, she is interested in light as a medium and the reductive simplicity of the minimalist aesthetic. Mariah's fascination with light is due to its ability to transcend its physical boundary, thus creating an encompassing visual experience. As a queer and a feminist, her perspective on minimalism is one of criticism and homage. Her work attempts subvert minimalism masculinity by pairing it with queer poetics and human intimacy. I'm gonna invite her in. Hey,
Hello.
how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good to see you in this strange setting, but
I know, right?
yeah.
All right.
I introduced you to our audience, and I just want to start, from the start.
Mhm.
So tell us how it all started. When did you realize you were an artist?
Ooh. I guess I am still trying to get used to being an artist. I don't know if I ever had that aha moment, but I guess if I had to pin it down, it would be pretty late in my life. As far as I guess I was in like the middle, during my midway, I think I walked away from that exhibition thinking that maybe I could actually make things that people might want to look at. So that's a super late answer, but I think that goes back to that maybe this is like my second life. The athlete part was my first life, and then so coming into college, I like to think of myself as an academic bred artist. Um, but really, yeah, I guess it was a lot later than people might expect, but I
Yeah,
think that's when I started getting that confidence for sure.
got it. And what kind of sports did you do?
I guess kind of everything. I was heavy into basketball, but softball for most of my childhood, volleyball, anything really.
It's interesting because I was so bad at sports that stepdad had to write me a note saying that I had a physical condition that I couldn't attend because I'm tired of being bullied.
Yeah, like can't, just can't. That's
Totally
awesome. Yeah, yeah.
cool. Well, you have a very impressive body of work. I've always been really impressed every time I see a piece by yours, by you. And as an undergrad, especially, the
Mhm.
concept behind your work is so, very strong.
Thank you.
And could you tell us about that and your main inspirations?
Yeah. I mean, I guess it all started with minimalism. I was highly attracted to the aesthetic purely for aesthetics. There's something about just looking at something formally and not having to get it. It's just this sort of visual experience. I think that's what I bump into sometimes now as a conceptual artist. That sometimes you lose people when you're trying to have them get to something. So I really enjoyed that part of minimalism, but I found myself having something to say or wanting to say something with minimalism. And so I started pairing the minimalist aesthetic with, I guess, its opposite, which would be something softer, affectionate, human at least. And so um, that was kind of my first dabble into kind of conceptualizing minimalism. I started thinking about love, intimacy, um, and then going into my midway, I started to, I guess, juxtapose minimalism with a feminist perspective, um, making vaginal imagery, strong pink, feminist language to combat with the harsh aesthetic of minimalism.
Yeah.
And in that, I found, after that midway exhibition, I found that I was trying to combat with these parameters, masculine and feminine, harsh, soft.
Mm-hmm.
And so going into my thesis exhibition, I think I started to try to find the middle ground between those two, where I'd set the parameters in my midway, but then trying to blur the lines between masculinity and femininity and hard and soft. And in that, I found myself into like a queer theory, queer dialogue, where things became more fluid and more and less sort of harsh on these polar opposites.
Polar up. And I like playing with those, you know, I like that contrast,
Mm-hmm.
but also trying to find this fluidity within. I think you do really well. I wanted to share with everybody. Let me see if I can do that. Some of the images of your work, so they know what we're talking.
Yeah.
It's a bit weird because like on Instagram, the way it cuts, but then everybody would get an idea what I'm getting into here. Okay, yes, it's there it is. So here is one of the images of her work hanging at Student Gallery South at UNR. And another one, I wish I could move my little square. So her work, as you can see, is you know, very minimalist, but there's a lot more to it than you're seeing here.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, from reading your artist statement and knowing a bit about your work, I was not surprised to find out one of the artists that you were influenced by.
Mm-hmm.
And can you tell our audience who that is, and also why she was so influential to your creative process?
Yeah. Well, the artist I shout out, I guess, in my long artist statement is Anne Truitt.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you have this photo up because you can see that relationship quite apparently. But I think this might have been like a secondary artist statement where in the beginning I was always quoting the boys, the Dan Flavin, Donald Judd, Richard Serra. So then trying to get into it, recontextualizing minimalism, I felt that if I was calling out the boys still, then maybe that wasn't so, it was just perpetuating the same conversation.
Yeah.
And so actually in my midway exhibition, somebody came up to me and they're like, oh, you know, Anne Truitt. And I was like, shook my head, like, yeah. But I could honestly say I did not know who that was at that time, which is sort of embarrassing. But so I went and did research and got my bearings on, you know, female minimalists and found that, you know, Greenberg had quoted her as the founder of the primary object, meaning the founder of minimalism, you know, at its root. But somehow we had lost that history. So I'm super interested in that lost history, recontextualizing that in 2020. So that was a very purposeful shout out as far as that statement goes, but also aesthetically, thinking about object as canvas or color as paint or object. And so that blurring those lines I'm super interested in. And that was what her sort of foundation of her practice was.
And it's interesting that you said, you know, at first you're, you know, concentrate on the boys because when I started teaching art history, for me, it was really hard to come to terms that every art history book is very focused on that cis, male, white artist. And that our students are not being exposed to women, to queer artists, to Black American artists, you know, natives. And so I decided to go without a textbook, because I was like,
Right.
there's no textbook that will
Hmm.
teach the students what I want them to learn, you know.
Right.
So it saddens me that, you know, you were exposed to those,
Hmm.
and then you had to like research
Hmm.
deeper in order to learn about,
Right.
you know, and
Yeah.
think things have to change a little more.
Yeah, and the hard part is because I love the boys' work so much. And
I
I
know.
like it's hilarious to say the boys because it's like they're my best friends. But I truly love the aesthetic and I tend to contest with it a lot, but also so much of my visual experience has to do with minimalism. And so it's a hard balance between liking and hating what it is.
And it's like, it's not that you have to hate white cis male artists. And I tell my students, I'll do the PG version here, but it's kind of like eating pizza every day, you know? It's like, not
Hmm.
that pizza's bad, but there's
Yeah.
so much, you know?
Yes. Right. Right.
Yeah, you'll probably be unhealthy if you ate pizza.
Hmm.
But pizza's
Hmm. Yes, exactly. I like that.
um, so I wanted to check with you if there's any contemporary living artist that influences you, and that could be a man. It's okay.
Yeah, yeah. That's funny. I think I have like a little list here, and well, they're queer men, so I think that counts as something. But I
Person.
guess most of my influence, because I was so bred in academia or born in academia, I have these huge ties to past artists, 70s especially.
Hmm.
Um, and so I had to kind of again train myself how to be interested in contemporary and how to access contemporary artists, and that would be through Instagram. And that what I was realizing was that ranges from my closest friends to strangers, all alike. And that I am drawing inspiration from my closest friends, their activity, their, daily studio shots and whatnot. And I think that that's highly inspiring, especially now when it's hard to get into the studio. But as far as I saw this recent exhibition, well, I found this exhibition recently. It was in 2017, but the name of it was You're Reading Into It, Queering Contemporary Minimalism. And I believe it happened in the UK. There's an artist, Oliver Doe curated it, Garth Gratrix, I believe that's how you say his name, and then Rachel Ara were some artists in there, and I fell in love with their work. It's beautiful, it's soft, it's minimal, and their whole sort of premise was to queer contemporary minimalism. So I found this like home in these people's panel discussions and their articles. And so then following them on Instagram and having that sort of recent trail of work and super inspiring. Their aesthetic is beautiful. But they're friends. I mean, even like graduate DePaul Vera, his Instagram, I just love it. And not aesthetically to my, we're not aesthetically the same, but there's something about the persistence that everyday making that
Yeah,
is super inspiring. And so I guess I get a lot of that from Instagram.
beautiful. And you mentioned that this exhibition, you know, that it has very, you know, the label queer. You know,
Mm-hmm.
the discussions I have with my students is that, what do you, you know, like, because I feel like every artist would like just to be seen as an artist and be included in the art world
Mm-hmm.
without, you know,
Mm-hmm.
being labeled native or
Mm-hmm.
black, you know, or
Mm-hmm.
queer. And I asked them, what do you think about these labels? You know, what do you think about this exhibition that is like, okay, you know, here's a queer exhibition.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
a queer artist. Wait, I'll give you my opinion, but I want to hear
Mm-hmm.
yours first.
Yeah, so I guess had to battle with that a lot in my oral defense as far as um, it was defending visibility and invisibility. And I guess a lot of my work, and you can see that in the paintings, the subtle tones, you can't tell the difference between some of the hues. And so I'm interested in visibility and invisibility as a concept in the queer conversation. Um, and obviously, I very clearly speak to um, queer theory in when I'm speaking and when I'm writing. But in my artist statement, that was displayed with the work, I didn't put the word queer in there. I put signifiers of fluidity and intimacy, and so I'm signaling to the ideas of being queer. But in that statement, I removed the word queer theory or queer specifically, which was definitely a choice that I had to defend but I think sometimes that gets off-putting for a viewer. So if I have the time to explain, then I give myself the ability to speak to that. Sometimes when I put it in a statement, I kind of edit that down a little bit. So it's definitely hard to, I go back and forth, I
Yeah,
think,
and
and I'm still getting used to it. Yeah.
yeah, whole concept in everything you do and everything you write, it is that paradox, is that contrast, and
Mm-hmm.
that becomes very powerful.
Mm-hmm.
But I was, what I tell my students, because some of them are like, wow, it's, you're ghettoizing these people, you shouldn't be labeling them, and
Mm-hmm.
that. But, and I feel like we're not in an ideal world yet. And for these artists to be included in the scene, I feel that we do need exhibitions that are dedicated to
Mm-hmm.
queer artists and
Mm-hmm.
women and,
Mm-hmm.
Black American. I think, like, until we reach an equality in
Mm-hmm.
percentages that are in, auction houses and galleries
Mm-hmm.
and all that, I think labels are healthy for the
Yeah.
model.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think I
Yeah.
really try to use that label in maybe even an opposing way. I think there's a high importance on queer art that looks like queer art,
Hmm.
and I'm interested in queer art that doesn't look like queer art and still
Yeah.
having it be contextualized as queer art. Um, and that's something I'm sort of just dabbling in, I guess conceptually.
Hmm.
I yeah, so my work doesn't look like queer art, but it
Yeah.
does in this other sort of broader context.
And there, the queer theory really, it really fascinates me in many ways. And,
Mm-hmm.
there's so much out there to read that will enrich, not only your practice, but I feel like a lot of people that are not familiar with it should, read.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, well, let's change gears a little bit. We're getting towards the end. So people that have questions, feel free to type them in, and then I'll ask her at the end. And I have two more questions for you.
Mm-hmm.
So, have you been creating during this time of isolation? And I saw somewhere on the internet that you were chipping stones.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, what have you been creating?
Mm-hmm. Um, so the answer is yes and no. I haven't been creating in the ways that I normally do.
Yeah.
And that's, I guess, probably for a lot of people, probably everybody right now is creating a little bit differently than they usually do. But yes, I've been moving digitally, just getting used to Adobe Suite, getting a website together, CV, like the things that slip under the rug. I've been really trying to amp up and get those things out into the world. Especially coming off of my thesis exhibition, it's almost perfect time to have some downtime and to get those things in order.
Focus. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, sculpture class still kind of continued online. So those assignments were prompting me in interesting ways. I was throwing a pity party and I was like, I'm a sculptor. I don't have a saw. But then I had realized, well, go back to the roots of sculpture. And so that's when I was chipping away at a rock. It was sort of this kind of like funny take on sculpture. People think that, when you say sculpture, they think you're chipping away at a rock. And so it kind of just played into that a little bit.
Hmm.
And it ended up being like documented in a photograph. I had laid this really weird rock in a bed, like just kind of messing around with photography and displaying that for my sculpture class. I was thinking about Instagram as site. So we had a prompt that said site specificity, and thinking about Instagram as a place where art could actually live and purposefully live and only live. So that was interesting. I think I'm working in those sort of ways, but I really like the digital aspect of it right now, drawing and getting used to Photoshop. I had never had time to do that. And so I'm creating in those ways, but I feel like I'm starting over in this whole digital world, but I think it's
Yeah.
okay.
It's like relearning or learning. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's
Interesting.
exciting. Yeah.
Any advices for other artists out there during these uncertain times?
Um, yeah, I think be easy on yourself. Some of us work well in chaos, and some of us don't.
Mm.
And letting either or be okay. Letting we'll get back to the studio eventually, or we'll make our own studios with time. I think half of us don't have jobs in the world right now. So
Right.
putting art or like the financial aspect, art's expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm definitely in that boat as far as just putting everything on pause just for a little bit, at least financially, before I can start really making it the way that I want to. But drafting, sketch, I mean, there's nothing stopping the thinking from continuing. And that's where I'm at. That's where I found a home base and felt comfortable in that sketchbook sort of
It's a good time
foundation.
to kind of work on concepts too.
Absolutely.
And more research.
Hmm.
I think a lot of younger artists don't realize how important that is. You
Yeah.
do, but I think that's important too.
Hmm.
To okay, maybe this time I'll take it to read. And
Exactly.
when do you graduate?
Um, I I think this weekend at some point. Um, I thought it was Saturday, but somebody said it was Thursday. I'm not sure. I like
It's
got
soon
through my thesis and then yeah. But I think I'm going to walk next spring.
to
Um,
get
and
that.
do that. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So we'll see.
And do you plan on staying in Reno?
For now, yeah, that's the plan. Taking a gap year, so I can kind of get my bearings, thinking about grad school, thinking about my next move. But as long as I can continue to looking for a job where I can make money and make art,
Yeah,
right? That's the goal for right now, until I figure out my next plan.
sounds good.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for
thank you.
you being part of our interview sessions. Enjoy, quiet time. Focus on positives, and spending time
Yeah,
with the ones we love.
mhm.
And then we'll be busy again in no time. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
all right. Thank you so
Thank you, Vivian.
much.
Thank you so much. Bye.